Good afternoon, and thanks for joining today's webinar on customer lifetime value. My name's Stephen Hampshire, and I'm one of the client managers at TLF Research. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of customer lifetime value, looking at how it's the key to developing a coherent loyalty strategy for any business. We'll have a look at some models for calculating lifetime value, some of them simple enough you can probably rough out an answer right now. And then we'll move on to looking at how those customer lifetime value figures can be used in your business. Finally, just to mention, as we go through today's webinar, please feel free to ask any questions using the chat box in your sidebar. We may have time for one or two at the end of today's webinar, and we'll respond to all of your questions afterwards. First of all, an introduction. So as I mentioned, I'm one of the client managers at TLF Research, and I've spent the last 18 years or so trying to help my clients improve their relationships with customers and employees. Why? Because we believe, and our clients believe, that having happy customers and engaged staff is the best way to achieve business success in the long term. Short-term cost cutting will deliver profits tomorrow, but investment in customers is going to pay off in the long run. These are some of the organisations that we work with, and I think the point I'd like to leave you with there is that they're across a whole range of sectors and industries. Something we'll look at later on is the fact that the nature of the relationship between customer value and long-term profit varies across different industries and for different businesses, but we believe that that link is fundamentally there in every industry that we've worked with. So I've mentioned the idea of a loyalty strategy a few times, and you might be wondering what I mean by that. In a nutshell, having a loyalty strategy means that a company has committed to achieving success by focusing on meeting the needs of its existing customers, thereby making them satisfied and loyal. Acquisition still has a role, of course, but retention is a much more important factor in the success of a business that's employing a loyalty strategy. And there's an important principle that underpins the idea of a loyalty strategy. Are you ready for the secret? Long-term profits beat short-term profits. That's it. That's the insight that provides the foundation for a loyalty strategy. If you accept that, then committing to existing customers is a no-brainer. If you don't, then it's an obvious waste of resources. The question is, what do traditional accounts prioritize? They're all about this year's or this quarter's profit, not the future. And that's where customer lifetime value comes in. It's a tool that helps us to evidence the long-term benefits of creating a good customer experience. And it does it in a language that the finance director is going to understand and appreciate. I'm sure you're familiar with the notion that acquiring a new customer costs more than retaining an existing one. Perhaps it's 5 times more, maybe it's 10 times more, maybe it's 20 times more. Pick a number you like and someone somewhere will have said it. A good starting point, I think, is to figure out what that number is for your business. But although the cost of acquisition is one of the ways in which a loyalty strategy pays off, it's certainly not the only way. The value of good experiences and therefore high customer satisfaction goes far beyond simply retaining customers. Satisfied customers are also likely to buy more from you. After all, they now trust you to do a good job. They're more likely to say nice things about you, referring you to friends and family. And those, by the way, are the 3 R's of loyalty identified by Harvard Business School in the late 90s. You may also find that satisfied customers are willing to pay more. That doesn't mean that you should identify your happiest customers and put your prices up, but it does mean that if you can differentiate yourself on service, that you'll find that you're having far fewer conversations about price. Satisfied customers also complain less, and that saves you money. And they also tend to be more efficient to serve, because the better fit they are for you, the more you get to know each other, the better your processes work for them. So customer satisfaction contributes to far more than retention, and it attacks both sides of that profit equation, because it increases revenues, the top 4 factors there, and it also reduces your cost to serve. But can we quantify that assertion? We can. And that's precisely what customer lifetime value helps us to do. Now, as I mentioned back at the beginning, customer lifetime value can be super simple. You take your average customer spend, multiply by the average number of transactions in a given period, usually a year, and then multiply by the average number of periods that a customer stays with you. That's customer lifetime value. Now, Phil Bressler of Domino Pizza did this very famously. He's one of the first people to use this simple approach. And he used it to remind his staff that a frowning customer represented $4,000 walking out the door. Now, pizza may only cost an average of $8. This is obviously quite a long time ago. But the average customer eats one pizza a week and remains a customer for 10 years. That all adds up to $4,000 of customer lifetime value. And I'd encourage anyone to do that sort of a sum. It's something that's very useful to involve other people in your business in working out and estimating. It makes concrete the idea of customer value. And it shouldn't really take you more than a little bit of discussion to at least get an estimate that everyone can sign up to. But there are some problems with that approach. Let's make up a fictional example. Let's say I'm a computer manufacturer selling a PC that's worth £1,500 to each customer on average once every 5 years, and let's assume that someone might be a customer for 50 years on average. That works out to a customer lifetime value of £15,000. Brilliant, yeah? But the finance director is going to be more impressed if we can talk in terms of margin. So if I make £100 margin on that £1,500 PC, my customer lifetime value figure becomes £1,000. And that doesn't sound quite as impressive. I guess it is at least positive. But our finance director is going to get involved again. He's going to be very keen to remind us that that £100 profit that we'll be making in 50 years' time isn't worth anything like £100 to us right now. So a more sophisticated model of lifetime value takes into account both retention rate, and that's built into the idea of the average customer lifetime in the Domino's example, and also a discount rate to correct for the present value of future earnings. The retention figure reflects the fact that we'll lose a certain percentage of customers each year. So any given cohort that we take on in year one tends to shrink over time. The discount rate reflects the time value of money, i.e. the interest we could be earning if we had that £100 in our bank right now. And it may also factor in risk. So if we take that same £100 margin and a 70% retention rate and a 10% discount rate, that equates now to a lifetime value of only £175. Now this approach is a lot more rigorous, a lot more sort of recognisable to an accountant than the Domino's version. And it will quickly reveal just how powerful your current loyalty strategy is, or isn't, in terms of building up future profits. But one caveat, it's very, very sensitive to changes in the assumptions we make about the discount rate and the retention rate. And as this second scenario shows, if we change the discount rate to, say, 5% and the retention rate to 90%, now our customer lifetime value figure shoots up to £600. So this is a useful approach, and as I say, a little bit more rigorous than the Domino's version, but we feel it tends to underestimate the value of a loyalty strategy for two reasons. First of all, it assumes that the retention rate is a constant. That's fine if we're already as good as we ever plan to be, but it doesn't allow for a strategy of improving customer experience and thereby satisfaction and loyalty and retention. Secondly, and probably more seriously, it assumes that the initial margin remains constant. And we're always earning £100 on every transaction we make. And there's good reason, as we'll see in a moment, to believe that that isn't actually the case. So although we can do better, this formula does strike a nice balance between simplicity and sophistication. We think it's best used to make comparisons between groups of customers. So if you compare the lifetime value of, for example, your promoters, your passers, and your detractors using this method, what you'll find is the differences quickly become very, very big indeed, and that's very persuasive, and it's a relatively quick sum to do. Now, moving on to the idea that margin doesn't remain constant. In his classic book, The Loyalty Effect, Frederick Reichheld outlined a much more in-depth analysis of the ways in which the value of a customer to a business mounts up over time. He showed that the pattern varies wildly by sector and has to be worked out for every business with its own customer base, but that very often the profitability of a customer does increase over time. At the point of acquisition, a customer has normally cost us money to get on board. But after that, as long as we hold on to them, we should expect to see a small profit each year that we hold on to the customer. And that's basically the same sum we've just looked at. But as customers get to know and trust us, and as we get to know them, there will often be opportunities to win additional business through cross-selling and upselling. We'll also be able to serve the same needs more efficiently, saving us money straight off the bottom line. And as we've talked about, happy customers bring in other customers. That saves us the cost of acquisition, and there are other benefits as well. Our existing happy customers are likely to bring in people like them, i.e. people who are likely to be good fit customers for us. Finally, happy customers may become less price sensitive over time, less liable to shop around, and probably more often willing to accept your recommendation for a product or a service that provides better value for them, but is also more profitable for you. Now, working those figures out in detail for your customer base can be hard work, but it pays off with a realistic understanding of the long-term benefits of keeping customers satisfied and understanding how those profits mount up over time. It isn't a case of retaining profits, it's a case of growing profits the longer you hold on to customers and the better relationship you build up with them. Now, inherent in Reicheld's approach is the idea that some customers are much more profitable than others. And that might sound obvious, but I think the crucial insight is that the most profitable ones may well not be the ones making you the most money right now in if you like, year naught. I've used the phrase a few times, good fit customers. One of the most important parts of a loyalty strategy is to be clear about which customers you want to focus on, because it's very rare to be able to meet everyone's needs to a world-class level. One of my favourite examples of this in practice is the decision that Jan Carlsen took when he was chief exec at SAS to mothball a load of newly acquired Airbus planes because, being bigger, they wouldn't allow the airline to meet the needs of its frequent business travellers, the customers that he had decided to focus the business on. So he mothballed those planes and instead he turned back to his ageing fleet of DC-9s, a smaller aircraft they were able economically to fly more often. Now, that kind of clarity of vision is only possible if you're taking the long-term view. And it's also essential to allow you to concentrate your decisions on what works for the right customers. A customer lifetime value approach means that you understand the huge potential value of holding on to the right kind of customers. And that supports significant investments and brave decisions like this one to mothball the Airbuses. How do you identify the right customers? Well, one classic database marketing approach is the RFM model. And RFM is a tool with three very simple principles in this order. Customers who have bought recently are more likely to buy again soon. That's recency. Customers who buy more often are more likely to buy soon than those who buy less often. That's frequency. And customers who spend more are more likely to buy from us than those who spend less, the monetary value. And applying that model is really, really simple, at least in theory. If you identify for each customer their last purchase date, the number of transactions in a period of interest, again, it's usually a year, and the total or average sales and sometimes margin for that customer, that gives you sort of three numbers for each customer. That lets you divide customers up into categories, again, often 3 on each dimension, to create a total of 27 equally sized segments. That allows you to do quite a lot of exciting things, but one of the most exciting is to look at the customers who score highest on all 3 of those dimensions. What is it that makes them different? Chances are those are the customers that are best fit for what you do, like what you do, are easy to serve and cheap to serve, and probably the most profitable. Customer lifetime value is useful in part because it's forward-looking. And one trap to be aware of is that what you're really interested in is not necessarily what customers are spending today, but what they may spend tomorrow or in 5 years. And that means identifying the right kind of customers. Customers who, to use Reicheld's useful rules of thumb, are liable to show loyalty if you give them reason to, are profitable to serve, i.e. they pay the bills on time, things like that, and like what you do compared to what competitors may offer. Those are the people you want to find identified, those are the people you want to build your loyalty strategy around. When you move to a more operational focus, it's often useful to look at the way in which the experience you create for customers translates to costs and revenues. In this example, we're looking at an insurance claim where we found that higher satisfaction correlated strongly with higher retention, fewer complaints, and a lower number of inbound calls. Putting those things together showed that the unhappy customers, the bottom 13%, accounted for 43% of the total cost of that process. Now that insight, as a piece of research, as an interesting insight, but more valuably, I think, is it supports several lines of attack for the business. First of all, we know it's worth investing quite heavily in eliminating dissatisfaction or bottom box to reduce cost. Secondly, it makes us wonder what's different about those dissatisfied customers. Is it maybe the fact that they're just not the right kind of customers for us? We would have been better off maybe not acquiring them in the first place. And thirdly, at the other end of the scale, can we get hold of more customers like the 50% at the top end who only accounted for 10% of the cost? Layering customer lifetime value figures on top of customer experience statistics, such as satisfaction index or NPS, often reveals huge differences, supporting significant changes to strategy and operational investment. Using customer journey mapping, which is the subject of one of our full-day training courses, you can link those differences back to specific experiences at the front line that form the key moments of truth for customers. So time to bring things to a close with a quick summary. It's fair to say that a customer loyalty strategy is not for everyone. But if it is for you, then you need to commit to it 100%. It's a long-term strategy, and the benefits may take time to be felt. But the alternative, by the way, tends to be competing on price, and that leads inevitably to commodification. Customer lifetime value is a useful concept for all organisations, and a good starting point is a simple back-of-the-envelope calculation like the Domino's pizza example we looked at. That helps to anchor the idea of customer value within the business, and that can start to achieve a cultural shift in the way customers are seen and served. More sophisticated models need to factor in the sources of financial benefit other than simply retention, and they'll be much more persuasive if you can show the impact on margin rather than revenue. A full understanding of customer lifetime value means modelling the impact unique to your sector and business of incremental gains to profitability over time. It's those growing benefits which will reveal the true and often enormous difference in profitability between a loyal, good fit customer and everyone else. Once you've got that evidence, it becomes pretty much a no-brainer to seek out more customers like that. Referrals, as we've seen, are powerful precisely because they tend to bring in good fit customers. A loyalty strategy is built on a plan to get and keep the right customers. You need, like Jan Carlsen, first of all to know who that is, then you need to create a proposition that appeals to them, and finally you need to back it up with an excellent customer experience that keeps them happy and retains them as customers. So I think we've got time for a quick question, Charlotte, if there are any.
Okay. How about, some of the figures don't look very impressive. Is it worth the effort?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's two important points to make in terms of that. The first one is that the retention figures I chose to use are not that big, and the impact of changes to the retention rate are much bigger than most people intuitively expect it to be because it compounds over time. So, for example, moving from a 90% retention to a 95% retention rate doesn't sound all that different, but it equates to an average tenure of 20 years instead of 10 years, and that makes an enormous difference to customer value. The other thing to point out is that the average customer lifetime value figure often will be a bit disappointing. Actually, if it's not, then you've got a sort of an unusually healthy business, I would say. It's when you look beyond the average that you can understand the difference in value between the best customers and the rest. So as a starting point, I'd recommend work out a customer lifetime value figure for your promoters, your passers, and lead attractors. Or if you use satisfaction index, divide it up based on cut points in satisfaction index instead. And what you'll often find is that the scale of the difference is astonishing, particularly between passers and promoters, where people are maybe not expecting such a difference to be manifest. Any other questions, Charlotte?
Yes. How much segmenting should take place before you put together a strategy?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think there are arguably two ways to approach that. So I think some people choose to set the stall out to say our strategy is to serve this kind of product or service to this kind of people, and really the segmentation or the targeting of their loyalty strategy is set entirely by their vision of what they want to do and who they want to do it for. Other people don't maybe have a clear view yet of who the right customers are, and I think if that's the case, then you need to do the segmentation to understand who are the customers that what we're doing works for right now. Let's sort of box that off and figure out and just be clearer that we're targeting those people deliberately, rather than that's how it's ended up being.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
I don't see why not yet.
Okay. Please can you explain how the customer lifetime model works on a subscription-based model, and that's for monthly subscriptions?
Right, I'm trying to think about that one a little bit. I mean, I think basically it should work. So this is entirely off the top of my head, so if I make some kind of crass error, I apologise. But it seems to me that if you use months as your periods for building the model, it should work in really precisely the same way. And you're talking about kind of churn from month to month rather than from sort of year to year. But I think the basic models ought to work with just sort of adjusting what the periods are. If I'm missing something really obvious, by all means drop me an email and point that out, and I'll have a proper think about it.
Great, thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much everybody for joining us today. We hope you found the webinar useful. Please feel free to give us any feedback by email. If you have any questions relating to the webinar that we haven't had time for, please forward them on to me or to Stephen, and we'll make sure we get back to you. If it's easier, we can give you a call. And just to let you know, we're currently running lots of different webinars and events. We have a Customer Insight Conference in London on the 1st of November. That's got real customer experience case studies, latest thinking, and guest speaker Linda Moyer. If you want some more information on that, that's all on our website. Okay, thank you very much again. Bye-bye.